Some ceramic suppliers, they carry different items that are made to put tile in, that are sized for tile. Some are made of wood, some are made of metal like this one. This comes with legs as well, but this is the top of the frame of the tabletop, and I want to make something that fits in there. So I've made a template to the exact size of the frame. And what happens then with the Mosaic, which helps you not have to do too much figuring on sizing. In general, this is a 12 3/4 inch across. This clay shrinks about 12% so that it would end up being 11 1/4 if it were all squinched up together. So that gives me 1.5 inches of grout space. So if a 1/4 inch, approximately a 1/4 inch, or maybe it's slightly less, that means I have room for 6 or 7 grout lines. If I do 5, then I'm going to have a little bit bigger space. So I want to shoot for 6 or 7. So you can see there's a whole bunch of numbers. I start labeling and figuring out the labor so that that'll be easier when you get all these little pieces and parts out of the kiln. You can figure out where they all go to. So I've traced it using a permanent marker. You trace all your lines, you start establishing what is going to be a separate tile, and you start putting numbers to them. But remember I said we're shooting for about 6 to 7 grout lines. So you start kind of scanning across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7-ish. And so you just sort of do a scan across here and there to make sure things you have about the right amount of grout lines. In general, you don't want to, you start also looking for different places where the tile will not pull away well. You don't want to trap a whole big shape inside of another shape. If this was the case, and you had the shape that fit inside of there, you'd want to cut in there so that these two parts can fit around it. So you want to start looking at your form and make sure as you start imagining all these different shapes pulling apart that everything will still fit well and have about the same amount of space around them. So, as I said, you're counting your general grout lines and also looking for trapped little traps of that need to be released. And sometimes you don't see them until you actually start working with the clay, in which case keep your marker handy because you might decide, oh, this should have been broken into 2 pieces, and then you'll have to relabel and mark that on your map, because this will be your map. So the first thing I did was cut the whole piece to the size of my panel, as you can see. And generally, when you trace this on the plastic, because the marker will take a little bit of time to dry, it's a good idea to trace it and your marker and let it dry a little bit, because otherwise you'll start scraping it off as you draw, because it's still slightly wet even though it looks dry. So I did this yesterday. And you want to take a blunt-ended tool. You can even use a unsharpened pen, a blunt pencil tip, anything that's not going to cut through your plastic, and then just start following all the lines. You're only following lines. You're not putting on the numbers just yet. The numbers go on the back. So I'm just kind of like double checking, making sure everything that I have, most of the tiles are about the same size. There's some of the main image that's a little bit bigger, but especially the background is mostly the same size. So that means those are all spread out and pull away from the main image in a consistent manner. Like say if I hadn't broken this side into all these different pieces and just decide, oh, this is small enough, I can just have all this thing, and this only had 3 grout lines, 3 cuts, but all these had 6 or 7, then that side would not pull away in the same way. And then, once it's done, leave that right there so that I don't lose track of where things go. So actually, you can just start cutting and not pulling away just yet. And that way, I'm cutting my major forms, the lines that outline my major form first, so make sure that those are nice and smooth and continuous. you want to hold your knife as straight as possible. However, if you have a little bit of an angle, since the other piece fits right into it and it's going to have a grout line, it's not the end of the world, but you want to try to keep your knife as straight as possible. This is a stage where if you're very, very careful, you can take it apart, but some of these little smaller areas might start to bend a little bit and then therefore get slightly misshapen. So I'd say it's best to let that firm up a little bit, just a little bit, and because you still want it to be soft enough that you can smooth and round the edges of your cuts. So I've been letting this cut mosaic panel dry, set up a little bit to be able to pull it apart, but in the interim I was looking at my original image and was realizing that I had forgotten to put some texture in before, and I needed to put that in before I start pulling it apart. The center of the flower had these little textures, and so I used the tip of this pen and impressed them into that area. And then I used the rounded end of this rubber tip tool, to make the subtle kind of depressions that are in the texture of the petal. So now I've transferred all the numbers onto this piece of paper, because as you take the parts off from this part so that you make sure that you have numbered it correctly and placed it on the right place, it's best to just lay it right on top of a drawing. But I don't want to lay it over the plastic, because if it's over the plastic, then the bottom can't dry very well. So you'd rather lay it on paper. So I usually use tracing paper, and or your original drawing, you can put the numbers on. But in this case, I have a piece of tracing paper, and I have all my numbers transferred, and I have my image over there to double check. Gonna peel off the first piece and texture the back. And then that should be number 14. So I'll put a number 14 on the back and put it in place. Trying not to mar them. Actually, as you lay each piece, you want to round and smooth your edges. So this one's all smoothed out.